Othering Podcast explores the world of marginalized communities with a focus on the disabled and LGBTQ+. In our discussions, we will provide a platform for our guests to advocate and share their stories. By delving deep into their difficulties and successes, we will explore the changes necessary to improve lives everywhere. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to the Othering Podcast with Mike and Dory.
PEP Radio, part of the Pennsylvania Equality Project, advocates for the rights of LGBTQ plus people, the disabled, and marginalized communities. We play music from all 7 continents from 1928 through 2025 in English, Spanish, German, African tribal languages, Korean, and Japanese. We also offer news, history lessons, and are proud to include the Othering Podcast in our programming lineup. Tune in on the Live 365 app, Roku, and Alexa every Saturday and Sunday at 4 p.m.
All right, today we are talking to Nina Tame. She is a disability content creator, writer, and mentor from the UK. She uses her social media accounts to debunk outdated social myths about disability and the ways ableism runs throughout herself and her life. Her experience of growing up disabled and parenting a disabled child is a continual influence that runs through her work. With wit, passion, and lots of wheelchair selfies, Nina's work explores the nuances of the disabled experience while contributing to the growing, diverse, and brilliant online disabled community. Welcome, Nina.
Yes, welcome, and thank you, Mike. That was like the best you've ever read.
It is.
That was lovely. Thank you very much.
And we're so excited to have you on here, and truly, thank you so much for, coming and talking with us. Like, I was so nervous asking you to come on because I was like, she's got so many followers and she's so busy. She's going to be like, who are these people?
No, not at all. I always just feel really honoured when anybody just wants to have a chat with me. I'm like, with me? Okay, yeah, that'd be nice. So thank you.
And that's great because the whole point is to be a part of the community and to talk to people and get your voice out, especially as an advocate. It's very important to be a part of the community. So responding to people, I feel like, should happen, not just ignore everyone that DMs you or tries to talk to you.
Well, I
think that's great.
If they're saying, can I have a free, arm pick or foot pick, ignore those people.
We ignore the big companies that are trying to get something out of me for nothing. But no, I always love, because exactly what you've just said. This for me has always been about community. My Instagram page, I never set out to do anything that I've done. It just kind of organically grew. And for me, that's still the best thing about it, though, is talking to other people. And for me, learning about other people's experiences as well, because, it's such a continual learning journey, undoing all of the stuff that I'm trying to undo.
Yeah, I'm new to using a wheelchair myself, and watching you and learning from you has helped me immensely with, being in the wheelchair, because you learn in so many societies, and I find that kind of interesting that so many are so ableist across the board, no matter where you're from, and you get these notions in your head, well, you're not supposed to need these things because you're supposed to be big and tough and, keep going. And I want to thank you because, and this may come off wrong, but I want to thank you because you showed me that it's okay to need those things.
Yeah, that's really nice of you to say. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It was such a journey for me because I grew up disabled, and I didn't I used mobility aids through my teenage years and found it absolutely horrific. I hated it. Nobody wants to be at school and just being one of the only kind of different ones. And then through my 20s, I didn't need them. And at that time, I was so grateful for that. I didn't identify with being disabled. I didn't really know any other disabled people. I thought all of it was just a bit of a flaw, that it was a negative. And then obviously for me, it was learning off of other people as well. For me, firstly, it was, I had a child, my third son has got the same disability as me. And it just I always say this, but it's just so very, very true. It looked so beautiful on him, that it just opened up this idea of, okay, well, maybe it's not this hideous thing on me then. And then after that, it was literally discovering kind of other disabled people on Instagram and seeing other people not hiding their mobility aids. Like, you know, I used to nearly break my ankle trying to hide my walking stick in pictures when I used to use that, because I was like, oh no, you know, it somehow ruins my outfit or whatever. And it's just so ridiculous. Like, it's just an assistive device. That's it. But I think we're all kind of sort of almost scared into, oh, one day you might need a wheelchair. Whereas actually for me, by the time I chose to get a wheelchair, it wasn't a sad thing. It was like, oh my God, this is going to give me so much freedom. This is brilliant. This is so exciting. I feel as excited as when I got a new bike when I was like 13. And I think sort of trying to sort of neutralize the way people see these things, that, you know, they're literally just a tool. It's not a tragedy. We don't have to add all this extra like sad language around it. People are going to feel differently. Some people will feel sad about using stuff, and for other people it will be a journey kind of to embracing it. Sorry, I'm really waffling.
No, you're not.
But you know, that's just to say that, you know, how you feel, that was a really lovely thing to hear. But, you know, likewise, so much of my confidence and learning and growing has come from other people, you know, within the community who've been doing this for longer than me. So, yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing to kind of realize that not only do you need it, but it's so refreshing. Well, not refreshing, like, you know, ooh, great drink. Refreshing in the ways of your whole body just kind of relaxes. And like everything just seems to kind of fall into place. Not like all of a sudden you get the good job and all of a sudden you got the perfect house, but everything seems so much better when you finally embrace using those tools, because the pain is better. At least for me, it is.
Yeah.
It feels like a huge weight is lifted.
You have a freedom.
Yeah. And instead of worrying about, well, what is everybody going to think? It's like, you know what? I don't care anymore, because I feel not only free, but I feel like I can focus on other things, because I'm not in so much pain trying to hide, you know, my sticks and my wheelchair, and I'm not trying to hide any of that stuff. So it's like, oh my God, I can think of other things instead of the pain. And I think that's a lot of what people don't always grasp when they first start to have to use those tools, is that it feels so much better in being able to think of other things instead of just worrying about what are people going to think.
I think the first time, where was I going? Oh, we're going to a concert. I was going to see Childish Gambino. So I knew it was at a big sort of stadium. I was going with one of my older nephews, and at that time I was using crutches. But for me, like those kind of shiny floors, which are now my favorite, using crutches, I felt like every time I put my stick down, it was going to slip, and I would be I was in pain. So I was never, on days out, just could never be sort of present in what was happening. I couldn't fully enjoy myself, because I was like, am I going to fall over? Do I need a rest? Oh, my legs hurt, etc. And then it was Jace, is my other half. He said, well, look, why don't you just hire a wheelchair for the evening and see how it goes? And I was like, and then I did, and I was like, well, this is brilliant. Like, I was just like, I wheeled around. I went to the toilet on my own, because I didn't need anyone to like hold my hand in case I fell. And I thoroughly enjoyed the night. I was able to dance around a little bit. And it was just, and that was kind of it for me. I think I did that a few more times until it was like this, like I have a better quality of life in the wheelchair than I do on crutches. And even though doctors would say to me, oh, you know, you mustn't give up walking, and, you know, use it or you'll lose it. I mean, and it's true. I don't have as much mobility as I did previous to using the chair. But if I'm weighing it up, I'd rather not be in pain and rather get to enjoy my life than half enjoy my life. But wow, at least I'm walking.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same. Like, the thought process is, yes, I understand that the less you use it, the more it'll go away, it'll atrophy and all of that stuff. But not having the pain from like my lower back down is worth the trade up in my mind. Being able to just get out there and not only sit in that manner where you're stuck in the car or, you're just stuck in a chair.
Mm.
Being able to move around in a wheelchair and go where you need to go is totally awesome. And can we also say how fucking awesome it is that you went to Childish Gambino? I mean, that's cool.
It was so good. It was really, really good.
I have a question. You had mentioned going through school, you were starting to use mobility aids and it wasn't that great for you. I was bullied a lot in school, I had a lot of problems, and I didn't have anything like a mobility aid that stood out as being, quote, different. How did that affect you mentally, mental health, and how did you kind of get past that as you got older? I mean, I know you mentioned your family member helped, but
So I think I'm trying to think. I'm pretty much straight away. I think my first year, which is year 7 over here of I know ours works slightly differently to yours. And then I think by year sort of 9, I was coming in on crutches a lot, and had sort of this special boot thing. I coped at the time so badly. I decided, right, well, I will become like a clown. I will be really funny, and I can't feel my feet. So I used to do a party trick where I would take my shoe off and I'd just kick a wall as hard as I could. And just for this attention thing of, although the attention's on me, I'm controlling it. And it was terrible. I think I ended up breaking my foot and, real bad idea. But yeah, I just sort of struggled. I had a group of friends at school, there was a really nice group who were the nerdy group, who I wish that I had just realized that I am that nerd and I had stayed with that group. But I sort of desperately tried to fit into what I thought was this slightly cooler group, and they were just mean girls. And I absolutely hated secondary school. And then I think, the minute I could kind of hide my disability, I sort of did. And the way I feel about it now has just been literally just has only really been the last sort of 6-7 years. And it just feels like I've just learned and unlearned so much stuff, because I don't even think I'd heard of the word ableism until 6 years ago.
Right.
And I realized I'd experienced it my whole life, but I just had internalized all of that. So that was a really big thing for me, understanding, oh, okay, this has got a name. This is discrimination. It wasn't that I deserved it. So I think, that was sort of a big turning point as well. And just, community, as I say, just having disabled friends, even though they've not got the same disability as me necessarily, that shared experience of saying, for example, sort of as soon as I started using mobility aids, I started getting asked questions what have you done? What's happened to you? Now, I was brought up that, you're polite to strangers, whatever, even if, you put that person's comfort above your own discomfort. So I would answer the question, I'd tell them all my medical details. They'd always seem super bored and fuck off. And then I'd just be like, oh,
Yep.
okay. And then sort of, I remember voicing this to my family at the time, and they were like, oh, I was like, I really don't enjoy it when people ask me. And they were like, oh, Nina, people are just trying to be nice. And I just sort of thought, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm just making a fuss. And then one of my first posts on my Instagram, which at the time was mainly just I don't know, I had just my family and sort of, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people on there. It was mainly just, pictures of the cats and the kids. And I put this post up about not being asked, like to be asked these questions. And I think I'd used a sort of disability hashtag as well. And then I just got so many comments with people agreeing. And it was just this real moment of, oh gosh, I'm not just being difficult. I'm not being weird or rude because I don't want to answer. None of us I realize some people do, but on the most part, there's lots and lots of disabled people who don't enjoy answering that question. And that for me was just a huge moment. And it just continued from there. It was just you just can't get enough. I'm just reading people's posts and their different experiences and of just, it feels like it's been a very wild sort of 6-7 years.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I didn't know ableism, the word existed until recently myself, because it's never talked about even amongst, especially for me growing up. I saw people that had, crutches, and there was a girl that had a wheelchair, and you didn't ask, you didn't talk to them beyond just saying hi and things like that, because they were always separated from us a lot of times. And so you didn't get this feel of there's ambulatory or there's different dynamics of it, because everything is on TV. And like I said, the person that I saw in a wheelchair, it was this, they're so disabled that, you know, they need that headrest and they need this mechanical wheelchair that does everything for them. And so you're not taught that there's any differences. And then you're taught that, well, you're not supposed to really ask them anything, because, you know, they're there, they're over there. So you gotta, you're okay. So you gotta be over here, type of feeling, and which is a disservice, because, you know, everybody's a human and we deserve to be talked to and everything. But it's that kind of implicit, unspoken type of feelings, and that you get when you see those things. And then to learn ableism exists was kind of like, that's what that was. That's what those feelings of, it didn't feel right, kind of being kept away from people that were different. And that whole thought process of, well, if you get near them, you might catch it, type of, it was stupid and silly. And I felt like that's a good name for it, and that we really don't need that, because it ends up hurting us in the end as well, even if you never have a wheelchair. But we end up kind of getting hurt because we never get to talk to those people and find out more about not just, you know, what's wrong. That doesn't matter. What matters is that they're people, and that we could have had a good friend, or, you know, a good learning experience. But because of ableism, you're kind of kept away from that.
Oh, and I think even, you know, for me, growing up as sort of a disabled person, like, I would look, because at the time I wasn't like a full-time wheelchair user, I would look at sort of disabled people who were wheelchair users and think all of the things that I call out now. You know, I would be a bit like, or I remember once I must have been I think I was about 16, 15. I wasn't very old. And I went and helped my dad, and we took a bunch of disabled kids out for the day. And I remember sort of thinking, like, you know, oh, I'm so lucky that I can still walk. And, you know, that's the sort of shit that I'd like be now like, oh my God, you know, you can't say that. That's terrible. But it was so ingrained in me that this sort of life, a life in a wheelchair, was sad. It was tragic. You know, as you say, you know, disabled kids are separated off if you're, you know, and I picked up on all of that. And I think it was sort of, for me, I genuinely believed it. Like, oh my God, I don't want to end up like that. I don't want to end up like that, sort of thing. So sort of learning and unlearning all of this stuff was like somebody literally just like taking a bag off my head and being like, this is how it actually is. And the same as you, I think, oh God, I just, you know, I missed out on these connections. I missed out on a lot of stuff because of this just sort of nonsense that you're just kind of told, and not even necessarily told directly, but, you know, the way with our media in the society that we live in, you know, you're obviously told that certain groups are othered and certain groups aren't as good.
And when I realized that I had othered disabled people as a kid myself, I felt so awful, because it's like, I know what it's like to be othered, and how could I do that to somebody else? But that's kind of what you're taught. You know, your parents don't say, don't do that, you know, go talk to them, be friends with them, find out what's going on with their lives. You're just like, don't stare, and, you know, go on your merry way. And
I think sorry, carry on.
Go ahead.
No, I think like that's the sort of thing, like I worry sometimes when I'm sort of talking about, you know, like, you know, not asking medical questions, you know, not asking me what I've done, that people are then like, oh, right, well, I just won't talk to you at all, sort of thing. And it's like, No, like I will happily all day long. If you come and ask me, compliment my wheelchair, compliment my wheel covers, ask me. I remember being stopped once by an elder gentleman, and I was like, "Oh, fucking hell, here we go. What's he going to say?" And he was so lovely, and he sort of said, "Oh, my dad was one of the first Paralympians, and I can't believe the difference in the tech in your chair now compared to his chair." And we had like a lovely conversation about that. Like I'll talk about accessibility all day long. But I think people seem to have this idea that if I go and like it's either it feels 50-50. It's either people that are so uncomfortable they just will not talk to me at all. They won't look at me, don't want to talk to me, just oh gosh, like you say, you know, we don't stare. So but I can tell when people want to stare and they're just trying really hard not to. But then you've got the other side of people that seem to think if I go and talk to them and either make a little joke or I'll ask them what condition they've got, that's a nice thing to do because I bet nobody talks to them all day long. I feel like it's that sort of, you know, and then obviously you've got just people, and I know the bar is low because if I'm ever out, say like I was shopping the other day and I think I just said to this woman, like she was looking at this dress and I was like, oh God, that's lovely. And then we just had a chat and not once did she sort of say, oh, you know, what have you done? We just had a normal chat. But then I'm like, oh my God, she was so nice. Oh my God, you won't believe this person I met. They were so nice. And Jason's like, oh my God, what did they do? And I'm like, we just had a little chat. That's it. But they didn't ask me anything really rude. But, you know, I get it. I get why there's this awkwardness because I think, you know, I felt like that towards other disabled people when I was younger. And I think there's such an amazing thing about social media for how bad it can be. The fact that disabled people have a platform to tell their own stories. You know, it's not a narrative that's being told by a non-disabled person like we always seem to get on the media. And I just think it's brilliant for people to actually, you know, because I think when you actually point out to somebody, oh, you know, when you're disabled, pretty much every time you leave the house, somebody's going to ask you about your medical details. And actually that does start to feel a bit crap. Most people are like, well, yeah, actually, if that, of course it must, you know, and I think for the most part, people just because our representation in the media and everything else is so shockingly poor, I think for the most part, that's, you know, it's the reason why a lot of people feel uncomfortable around disability.
Yeah. And like you said, with social media being a catalyst is so true because it gives everybody a chance to have those moments where we can teach other people about what's going on with us in our own ways, in our own time. And if we so choose to share why, that's on us. And it's not, well, you poor thing, how could you get so hung up? Or, you know, did you skydive and forget your parachute or something like that? And you don't get those, oh, you poor thing, quite so much. You can block those and just kind of share your story because our stories are much more than just the tools we use. Although it is important to kind of address those, I think, in a way, just so that other people who have to use them can see this is the type of chair that works best for this, or, you know, I've had to use crutches so many times. These are the best types. I think in that manner, we should, you know, really kind of point out the chairs and all of the tools that we use so that we can share what works best for certain situations. But beyond that, it's just nice that it's because we want to share it, not because we're constantly paraded in front of other people for like inspirational porn. And look, see, sweetie, you're not like this person, so you're okay. And and it kind of feels like that when sometimes you're going around and you know people are looking. You feel their eyes like boring into the back of your head, but yet they don't say anything. And it just, to me, I like having that option to share when I want to share, because I've seen so many of your videos and they're awesome, by the way. And especially like when you kind of flip it and you're talking to Jace and you're, oh, so wonderful that you're standing. It's so sweet of you to come out and show us your legs, kind of thing.
They're my favorite to make. I love them.
I love those because it kind of also, in a awesomely humorous way, shows at how ridiculous ableism is.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There's so much of it. Like, obviously you've got your real overt ableism where somebody's literally just saying something hateful and horrible. But for me, I don't, you know, I don't necessarily receive that very much. Maybe if a video of mine gets, a few numbers, I might get some trolls online. But in real life, I've so far, touch wood, never had anybody blatantly, say something horrendous to me. But every single day, like the little sort of, and it all comes, I think, from quite a good place most of the time. The people sort of saying, "Oh, mind the speed bumps," or "I hope you don't drink and drive," or
Yes.
all of this stuff. It comes from a good place. So I try when I'm like with the content that I'm making to not be too like rah rah rah. Don't say this, because I think for the most part it is just sort of an ignorance and people not really understanding that disabled people, no matter their disability, are still people fundamentally. And if I know you, if we're chatting and I like you and I know you and we're exchanging little bits of information, naturally you tell people, don't you? It's never that, I don't want to talk about my disability. It's shameful. It's private. It's just, the medical side of it. I don't want to talk about with people I don't know, because no one talks about any of their medical stuff to people they don't know, right?
Yeah,
But as I say, there's so much more to it than just that. So I will, love talking about mobility aids, love talking about, assistive stuff that I use around the house, or finding out what other people use and all of that sort of stuff. Like, just disability is more than just the medical, but that's all anybody seems to want to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, nobody walks up and says, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I am type O positive, and I broke my foot yesterday, and now I've got this disease." And you don't do that, naturally. So why should we have to then do that for you and say, "Hi, my name is Dory. I have CRPS. Nice to meet you," kind of thing.
It's so expected, though. I think, because if you watch, I mean, I don't know what it's like so much. Obviously, talking from like the UK, but if you have a disabled person, say, who's been invited on a, like the news or a current event program, whatever, they will say that. They would be like, this is Sharon and Sharon has cerebral palsy, or this is, it's so normal to introduce a disabled person followed by their diagnosis or what happened, their accident details. And it's like, what the fuck? Like, you can just say, this is Sharon, she's disabled or chronically ill, or whoever that, however somebody wants to be described, if that's even necessary at all either, because it probably isn't. But I think there is this sort of, it just goes hand in hand, disabled people, like, back from when we were in freak shows and people sort of saw us as medical curiosities. And it doesn't, it sort of sometimes still feels like, but then I don't know about you, but a lot of the time I do find it is the older generation more than the younger generation.
Yeah.
That will come up to me and ask me what's wrong with me, what's happened to my legs, for the most part.
Yes. I find that the younger generation, like little kids, they'll look and kind of look at me, and then I'll smile at them, and then it's like you can see that they're like, "Oh, okay," and then they'll smile back. And it's usually people about my age and older that are like, "Oh my God, what happened to you? Why are you this? Why are you that?" And it gets awkward because it's like, now, like, if you know me, I'm like the biggest klutz anyway. And that's partially why I ended up with CRPS. Because I am like, if there's a wall there or a tree, it could be 50 yards away, I could see it, and I'll still find a way to hit it. And so the question kind of makes sense in a way for me, because every other week I had like a new pair of crutches.
Right.
Growing up. But at the same time, it's still like, now it's like I don't really care to answer that, first, because that's not necessarily why I'm here. And yeah, I will happily do it for my podcast, because that's what my podcast is about. But that's on my terms. It's not because I have to go, on NBC or something like that and talk about my scientific work type of thing. And then, oh, by the way, we're going to also talk about the fact that I'm in a wheelchair. Because it always seems, especially here, it seems like that, where it's not just your accomplishments. It's your accomplishments mixed in with your disability.
Yeah, and I think that's like whenever I sort of talk about inspiration porn, I'll always sort of bring up the Olympics and how, you know, Paralympians and Olympic athletes are both athletes, right? But yet people will watch the Paralympians and be like, oh, look, he's only got one arm, and oh, look, and he's still swimming, as if like you've become disabled, and then they just kind of chuck you on the track and go for it. Because, you know, it's like, no, like they are skilled athletes. It's not despite of their disability that they're doing the thing. They're working with their body to achieve the thing, just like any athlete would. And I think, yeah, it's this idea that somehow, you know, you've achieved so much despite being in a wheelchair. And it's like, I wouldn't have achieved half the stuff I have if I didn't have access to this wheelchair, because I just wouldn't be able to do the things that I do. But people just still see that as the barrier as opposed to inaccessibility, which is the actual
That's the actual problem.
barrier.
And I've seen, you know, your posts and other people's posts about accessibility. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten a chance to get to the UK yet. I really want to. And how is it with accessibility? Like, is it more of the norm to have buildings with the ramps and the elevators and such? Or is it more the norm, like in America, where it's kind of, oh yeah, there's people here that might need something?
Yeah, so over here, I mean, it depends where you go. If you're in, so like if you're in any new building, like public building will be accessible. But like, for instance, so where I am, I sort of live about an hour outside of London, just like in a little town. And like our pavements are just shockingly shit. And in our local shops, I would say I could probably get into about 60% of them that step free. So I think it all just depends. Like our public transport's terrible. Like you can't get two wheelchair users on a bus. So you couldn't sort of, you know, if you were friends with another wheelchair user, you wouldn't be able to get the bus together. Wow. The trains are like in some parts of the country, or I think maybe one part of the country, the trains are really good because they've got like an automatic ramp. Whereas most of the trains, you have to wait for to somebody to come and bring you the ramp so you can get on. Sometimes they're not there at the other end with the ramp, so then you're just like stuck on the train. So yeah, it's okay. Like the big cities tend to be okay. So yeah.
New York
sounds about the same as here.
Yeah, New York City is pretty good about it, and I'm pretty sure Philadelphia is. I can't say, like, some of the smaller cities, it's like hit or miss. If you go to, there's a place around here called Emmaus, and if you don't mind going free fall down the stairs, you can get to the places that you want to do. Or if you find some way to like climb the stairs, and because it's like our places, a lot of around here are like 1700s, and so it's ridiculously steep stairs to get up, so you have to like either drag yourself or, like I said, you know, it's a nice little fun free-for-all bounce down some steps into the basement. And if you're very lucky, there might be an opening like towards the back of the building where the trash cans are or something.
Oh yeah. Love an alleyway entrance.
Yes, it is always the best. I've always dreamed of going to the back alleys where it's nice and scary. With the kitty cats.
I've done many. We went, actually, that was in London, to this bowling alley a couple of years ago, and they had a stair lift just for maybe a set of, say, 6 stairs, but that stair lift was out of order, and no joke, it took 5 minutes to get, like, they took us this alternate route through like the back rooms and alleys of London that literally took 5 minutes. It was interesting. It was very odd. But yeah, just because they just hadn't bothered to like fix the stair lift. It was, rubbish.
I don't understand that either, because the more people that you're excluding, the less customers you get, you know, because you got to figure if 1 in 4 people across the globe are disabled, you got to figure that that's a lot of money that you're losing out on. And, you know, just eyes that can say this is a great brand or this is a great store, or, you know, come here. And the exclusion just kind of, it's not shocking, but it is shocking.
There's so many, like, I remember sort of somebody asking this bank once why, or I can't remember if it was a bank, whatever it was, like, why aren't you accessible? And they were like, well, we just don't get disabled customers. And they're like, well, obviously, because you're not accessible.
Yeah.
Like, it's so, yeah, it surprises me. I think, like, sort of obviously with London and stuff, it's this, I don't expect it from really old buildings. Like, and I love those sort of buildings as well, and I can appreciate a good staircase. Like, I would never, but I think for me, it's like when it's newer buildings, or when it's like a shop that's just got a step like that, you know. But this is a podcast, a small step. Like, and you know that they could buy, say, you know, a 70 quid ramp and they just haven't bothered. That's when it really pisses me off, because I just think you could do it and you're choosing not to. Like, that's different to a historical building that, you know, they'd need to spend thousands to get it. You know, I get that sometimes, that not everywhere can be accessible for me, unfortunately. But there are a lot of places that could and just choose not to. And that annoys me.
I agree, because like I don't expect them to change, say, like all the lighthouses here, where they have those ridiculously terrifying stairs. I don't understand the point of seeing through stairs. It just bothers me anyway.
No.
And so I understand them not making an elevator, you know, retrofitting a really tiny elevator to see the top of the lighthouses. I get that. That makes sense. Don't modify those. They're tiny buildings anyway. But if you're building a new place, or if you are retrofitting something else that has the room and such, add that, because that's so many people that would love to see your buildings, that would love to see your products and such, that can't get in there.
I used to work for this amazing app called Sociability. And what they would do is, like, you could, like, they would go to restaurants, cafes, bars, etc., and then they would take pictures, rate their accessibility. Not rate, sorry, they didn't rate the accessibility. But they detailed all the accessibility. So if you went to London, you can open the app wherever you are, and it will bring you up all of the restaurants that they have sort of looked at, and you can see what the access is like. But the amount of restaurants that were accessible but didn't want to go on there. It was like, we were like, yeah, but you're just telling your disabled customers that you're accessible. Like, surely the only reason you choose not to come on here, you don't have to pay anything, like, is if you just didn't want disabled customers. It was that just and also the amount of restaurants where, because basically they had these like mappers who would go around to restaurants and be like, oh, hey, I'm from this app and this is what we're doing for disabled people. Can we just take a few pictures, blah, blah, blah. And the amount of restaurants were like, no, thanks. And we were like, yeah, but it's really important to advertise if you're, you know, even if you're not accessible, you know, you might be accessible for somebody on crutches. You might not be, you know, so all we're doing is just showing people what, no, thanks. Just not interested in the slightest.
It's not like if you touch our money that all of a sudden you're going to like have legs and arms disappear or something.
It's like we don't want those contagious wheelchair users in here. That'd be awful. Like, it's so, I don't know, it's weird, but you just sort of forget how many people generally just don't give a fuck. Like, just think, well, no, I've got enough customers. I don't need to, you know, have any wheelchair users in here.
It pisses me off, and it just boggles my mind at the same time. If you're in a business where you have to get money, saying, oh no, we don't want your money, just kind of seems the dumbest thing on earth. I mean,
we've got like a, is it the purple? Yeah, we've got like this, I don't know who set it up, but it's a thing called Purple Pound, this sort of where they talk to businesses about the spending power of disabled people and how every year businesses are losing out on like billions because either their websites aren't accessible or their shops aren't accessible. And yeah, I mean, there's lots of places that really do step up who sort of do it. There's also a lot of places that do the bare minimum. So I'll go and the ramp's like, you know, so steep that it would break my neck if I tried to go down it, or there's like sellotaped 2 ramps together or something, and you're like, no,
Yeah,
no, thank you.
no.
So I think there's still that, but there's also people that, you know, genuinely want to make their spaces as inclusive as possible for everybody also, and you know, they're my favorites.
And I don't want to, say that. I don't mean to make it sound like all we are is money, because we're not. We're way more than that. We're more important than money. But so many people equate, other humans with money, and see the dollar signs. So that's why I bring that up, because it doesn't make sense to say I don't want those trillions of dollars that could maybe make a whole lot of other people's lives better. It's not like you don't make your menus, accessible for people who wear glasses. You're not upset about taking their money, because, wearing glasses is a disability tool. And so you're not terrified that if you touch people who wear glasses, by the way, I wear glasses. If you touch my money, you're not going to suddenly need glasses. So why are you worried that if you touch my money, suddenly you're going to need crutches or a hearing aid or, a wheelchair? It doesn't make sense to me.
No,
And
no.
it's not, there's ways to make, even if you live in a building or work in a building that is just truly impossible to make accessible, make a website or something, sell your stuff online and make the website accessible, and say, look, we're in this type of a place that right now we can afford this, and so we can't move yet, but we would love your patronage.
Well, I think it's just that acknowledgement, isn't it, that disabled people exist in the first place. And I think that's why if I do I don't know, say go on a website for somewhere that I'd like to go and visit, like most of the time they very rarely have their accessible information written up. Like sometimes they'll tell you whether you can bring a dog in or not, but like not whether you can bring a wheelchair in. So when I see sort of a place that has gone to that effort to list how accessible they are or not, I'd rather go somewhere and then say, we're not wheelchair accessible. So I still know it, as opposed to turning up somewhere and then being like, fuck, I can't get in here.
Yes.
And just to know that they've at least acknowledged that, we exist and might want to come to. Yeah. I mean, it's, I feel like in some ways, like when you sort of look at, like a documentary Crit Camp was, I think that was around, like, I can't remember the exact date of like the 88, like all of that. And then over here we had similar protests, but that was more, I think, a bit later on in the sort of 90s and stuff. And like when you watch sort of documentaries about it, I'll watch it and just be like, oh my God, the stuff they did, absolutely amazing people. But then you sort of think, we've not really come on that much more in terms of rights and disabled people, having the same rights, getting the same pay, all of this stuff, however many years, 20 years, no, but it's like what, 50, 60 years. It's ridiculous.
No, back to 20.
And obviously, especially with everything that's, let's pretend that was 20 years ago. Like seeing all the news about, like scrapping DEI and knowing, disabled kids and adults are literally losing support to get to work because of, like, it's like watching everything, the small rights that we have. I think it was only last year when the American airlines were agreeing to obviously make their, I don't know, something like getting them more wheelchair accessible. And then I think now Trump said no to that or whatever. And it's like watching, and the same sort of over here, we've had a big bill voted on this week in the UK where they're choosing just to take money from disabled people as opposed to just taxing the flipping rich. But it just feels like we're just going backwards, that, and not even just for disabled people, obviously, just the whole thing of just like just that sort of attack on all sort of marginalized groups. It's just horrible to see, like, especially as, so, like, I'm in my 40s and it just feels like, it's just balmy to me, just how awful everything is.
I don't understand the level of hatred and disgust that they have for us. I mean, they complain you got to work and such, and you're not worthy unless you're working. and what can you do for your country is to work and all of that stupid shit. And then they make it impossible
Yep.
for everybody to even get to work and to have the opportunity to work because, here we've always catered to the businesses, especially since 1980. It's business this and business that. So, fuck everybody else. And the thing is that if you want us to work, then make it accessible to everybody so that then we can do that. And the fact that they want to take us back to the 1800s where not only women didn't have any rights, but in, other marginalized communities of color didn't have rights, but we had ugly laws where if you had a toe out of place, you weren't allowed to come out. And if you were pregnant, you weren't allowed to be seen. And it's just, I don't understand why you even want to live in that era.
No, people like talk about the good old days, and it's like they weren't that good. Like they were
No.
pretty bad unless you were a white, straight, non-disabled man, or slightly underneath woman. Like everybody else, it would just it's. I don't know. I just think it's so sort of sad. Like it just feels sort of. I can't remember what year we hosted the Olympics in this country. I think it was 2013 and Obama was president. And it just felt a little bit like, everyone's getting on all right. This is nice. And then everything since then has just gone absolutely not. It's, even like the first year of COVID, like as much as I was sort of terrified for my health when there was so much unknown around it as well, that sort of feeling of community and people coming together, and suddenly people did sort of want to listen to other people's voices, and we were all online and we were all learning. And then it obviously took a big turn, and now everybody hates everyone. And it's like, okay, that's you could just for a moment, I remember thinking we're building a new world. I mean, I'm clearly a very, naive, silly white woman, but it did kind of just feel, that the world is healing, but no. No.
I'm silly too, because I had hoped that when Obama was president, I kind of actually felt like, wow, maybe America can be what we're supposedly, claiming that we are, that we're trying to get over our racist past. And, it's not gone, but we're trying to get better. And then it's like Trump came back and it came and it's just like, never mind, stupid me.
And it's like, I watched a video the other day, like, it's bad when like the previous bad people were in power starting to look like, oh, actually they were okay. We've got that. I watched a video from America the other day, which was literally every president going back to black and white telly in their speeches, all mentioning how, immigration and immigrants are, fundamentally part of American history and what, and even the presidents that were all awful was still saying that. And then, you go to somebody like Trump and it's mind-boggling. Like if somebody had said, I think, obviously, I think we're all out of our 20s. Somebody had said to us that this is how it's going to go. Like, you'd just be like, that's silly. That's clearly not what's going to happen. That's ridiculous. And then it just happened. And then week on week at the moment, just something else comes out either from, the UK or over there. And it's like, oh, wow, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. And I don't understand the level of cognitive dissonance that is required to go to this level, and at how it benefits anybody going backwards, because at some point, depending upon who's in power, you can be disabled. You can be labeled disabled just at the drop of a hat. They decided that people who were against the Vietnam War were disabled, even though they weren't. And, locked them up and lobotomized them for, not wanting to go to work, God forbid. And then you're also one sneeze, fart, whatever, away from becoming disabled. I mean, it is true. There are people out there that have farted their way into disability.
That's a story, though, isn't it? If that had happened to me, anyone who asked me, I'd tell them. I'd just be like, yep, sure, I'm going to tell you. You're never going to believe this one. And
so it just makes no sense as to why you want to make it so incredibly awful for people. Because in order to do that, you can't possibly be happy. You can't possibly move forward if you're so busy trying to keep everybody back.
I think though, and I would say it's pretty much the same over here, there as here, is that they, these sort of, the 1% who are hoarding, like, I think most people don't understand how much wealth they are hoarding and how much the likes of all of the billionaires, how much their wealth has grown from pre-2020 to now. Like, and I don't think people comprehend how much bigger 1 billion is from a million, let alone these are multi-billionaires, and their wealth is going to keep growing and growing and growing and growing. They'll keep buying up all the assets, all the property, all of that, so everybody else is fucked. But they manage to convince the average person that actually, no, you're a bit poorer because of those disabled people on that benefit. It's their fault that they're getting, just enough to live on and get by, but it's their fault. And people believe it. So then people vote for these people thinking it's going to make their life better. And then inevitably these people in power only improve the lives of fellow multimillionaire billionaires. And we're all just getting worse and worse off. But people, in the UK, like, it's like we've always had more of a class thing than, say, America, like upper class. Like, it's always been very sort of predominant, and it was the ruling class in this country that started racism. Like, when we had Irish people who were powering up with black people because they wanted rights, they wanted this and this, and the ruling class were like, well, fuck, we can't have this, so we'll just give those white people just that little bit more, and then we'll make them hate the black people. And it plays out. We have this at the minute with immigration. Immigration's always obviously you really do as well. It's always such a hot topic. Disability benefits is always such a hot topic. And, for as long as I can remember, these groups get the blame for everybody else not having enough. And it's like, how can somebody underneath you who doesn't have as much as you be at fault for your life? Of course, it's the people above, but most people think they're closer to Elon Musk and being able to achieve that lifestyle. And it's like, no, of course you're not. Like,
no, especially, and the more that they amass their wealth, the further away you have of even becoming a millionaire.
Yeah, because there's nothing left for anybody else.
It doesn't make any sense how, and maybe it's because of, my perspective growing up as a person of color, mixed and all that stuff, and observing those things, but I don't understand how you can sit there and look at the oppressed and say, oh, yeah, of course it's their fault. I don't understand that. How do you not hear them telling you in pretty plain, straightforward English, these are the people you're supposed to hate, because if you guys band together, we're fucked, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I find it's so frustrating, because that if people did all band together, there is power in that. But instead, half the population, or if you dare to go protest, they're like, ugh. And it's I don't know what to that sort of balance of making sure I'm staying informed whilst also making sure I'm sometimes not continually doom scrolling and taking in so much information that we're not supposed to, we're not built to be seeing this much horror and terror. But at the same time, you don't want to put your head in the sand and ignore it and pretend that everything's okay. But yeah, I think it's hard to, you just have to kind of grab onto little bits of hope, I think.
And that's what I wanted, to do with this, is talk about those issues of, we all have been duped at some point in our lives by somebody seemingly more powerful. And the truth is, they're really not. They just may have more money, but that doesn't make them really more powerful, because the collective is greater than one person. And yeah, there's more than one billionaire, but I mean, there's 53 total in the world. And I'm pretty sure that if there's over 7 billion people on this earth, we outnumber 53.
Yeah, we do.
And I think at some point, people, I'm hoping, maybe it's stupid of me to think this, but we'll realize that together we can make a better place. And there's always hope. And, for the longest time, I didn't think there really was hope. And I got stuck in that thought process of there is no hope, there is no hope of anything, getting better. This is just the way it is. And then, ironically, it was when I became disabled that I actually saw hope and realized that there really is hope. There's always hope. And, people survived horrors throughout history and somehow managed to get through that and come out stronger. And I feel that as long as we all have each other and we try to, even if we're ponds apart, that as long as we try to keep each other sane and from the doom scrolling and all of that stuff, that our community will find a way to come out stronger.
Yeah, that's where you got your hope from having people that have something in common with you and that agree with you and have the same beliefs as you. And that helps a lot when you have a group of people that have similar beliefs and you're not constantly bombarded by the news telling you completely different what you don't believe and what you don't want to hear.
Yeah, because for the longest time, it just seemed like I was alone because, it felt like black people, white people, Asian, all of that stuff, everybody was against me kind of feeling. I'm just one person. It's not true. Of course, it's awfully big ego of me to think everybody's against me. But it was still that kind of thought process because growing up, it was always, I wasn't accepted by all of those groups. And then being a part of this community, the LGBTQ and disabled communities, has made me feel like we're not alone in this and that there truly is a community for me. And then, the protests that we keep having where back in 2020, where everybody was marching for Black people's rights. It was just like, oh my God, there really are people that care. And then the marches we just recently had here and that we're going to have again at some point, kind of is like, oh my God, again, these people do care. There are a lot of people that care. And it's not just these hateful group. They're actually a smaller, more vocal minority than the people who actually care and want a better world.
Yeah, and I really believe that as well. And I think the media, thrives on hate and everything, doesn't it? And social media and our algorithms do as well. And I think the stuff we see, I think can feel, because you see so much of it, it can feel like, well, this is the majority of people who feel like this. And for the most part, I think most people are maybe not indifferent, but are just wrapped up in their own lives and their own worlds. And then when something is pointed out to them, whether it's that they meet a trans person and listen to their story, or a disabled person or a Black person, whatever it is, and then I think they're like, oh yeah, they just didn't know. And I think, I'm a very strong contender of know better, do better, because that's what I've been doing, all my life is, I've done some things that were terrible and said some things that were terrible, but again, know better and do better. So I like to think that there's a lot more people like me who just have been ignorant before and then are, on that journey to doing the learning, and those people that, as you say, are just like, you can't tell me what to do, I hate everyone and I'm the best. Like, I think they are of a minority.
Yeah. And it's not to say that I didn't, that I'm some saint. We all know that's not true. And, I'm ashamed to admit that as a kid, I made fun of, disabled people. That stupid trying to bite your own ear thing that people did in the 90s. And I hate the fact that I did that. And
but you didn't, like, I think we all have this stuff that is just we learn from our peers or our parents or whatever it is. And I think even now sometimes if my first thought is one that I think, and I remember, like, your first thought doesn't count, because your first thought's just like your conditioned thought, and it's your second thought is your learnt better thought. And I think it's just, I think whatever you did as a kid who was also surviving being in a marginalized body, who was dealing, I think when you are dealing with it yourself, it's a bit like bullies bully. I think sometimes when you're dealing with it, or you're trying not, for me at school, I would almost be glad when somebody else was getting picked on, because I'd be like, thank God it's not me. Like, they're not picking on me today. So I'm not saying it excuses anything, but I think, as kids, it's really hard anyway. And when you're somebody that maybe doesn't fit in, it can, I think you can do things that maybe you regret later on.
Yeah, and it's true, because sometimes you get in those groups. Sorry, Mike. You get in those moments where you're already the odd man out because of a disability or something. That in my case, my color, and so you kind of want to fit in. You want to be somewhat accepted, and so you do things that you might kind of cringe at later in life. And that's a part of learning, though. And I think that as long as you're not like murdering people just to kind of murder people, unless they deserve it, that's different. But I'm not condoning murder people, so don't worry. You kind of want to do those things because you want to fit in. And you brought up a good point about bullying, that sometimes you get in those situations where you're just like, oh, thank God it's not me today. Or thank God I can like absorb into the wall and not be picked on that moment. And it's not to excuse what we've done, but when you're children, you're not 100% knowledgeable of all of the social ills and norms anyway.
No, and I think depending on your sort of upbringing, my parents, they didn't really talk to me about anything. I'm not saying they didn't talk to me, but they certainly didn't talk to me about anything like life skills or emotions or being a good person. And it's something that I will point, like, one, obviously my kid who's disabled, and he wears a leg brace, and they're all conversations I'll have with him and say, you mustn't ever let your difference make you mean to somebody else that might be different, because and I told him what I was like, because I want him to be able to learn from that. And I mean, like, he's got such a strong sense of justice anyway, and he's so gobby that I don't actually really worry, because he's quite happy to just march up to someone if he thinks they're being an arse. But I just wanted him to be aware of that actually sometimes if you are different, that that can sort of just for him to have that awareness that he just has to be not.
We need to start wrapping it up, but before we go, I wanted to ask you or talk to you about your advocacy. And like, how did you go from sharing a couple pictures of your dogs and kids to where you've become today with the content creation, and you've been on different platforms and media, and just you've really taken off and become a good voice for everyone.
And a celebrity.
How did you get to that point? How did you kind of come to that?
Partly just by accident, I think. I think just sort of my account in 2019 started to just sort of, as I said, like that first post I put up about intrusive questions, that sort of got really good feedback. I sort of found other disabled people and started following them. And then I think my sort of biggest thing, like my son was always my biggest thing. Like, if I can just make one person, think to themselves, I'm not going to ask a disabled person an intrusive question, or if I can just make the world better in just a tiny way for him, then I would be really happy. Because he was thinking, like, when he started, sorry, I know we're wrapping up, and I'm about to tell you about a 5-hour story now. I'm not really. But when he started school, it was such a turning point for me, because he kind of would come home and be like, oh, mummy, I was just trying to play and somebody asked about my leg. And that, for me, even though I'd always answered all my life, that was such a turning point as well for me, being able to say, oh, actually, babe, do you know what? You don't have to answer. You can tell somebody if you want to, or you can make up an elaborate story if you want to, or you can just say, my mum says I don't have to answer that, or if it's an adult, you can tell them to bugger off. Like, you can, I don't care. Like, an adult should not be asking you anything like that. Anyway, so he was always my, and still is, like, my reason for doing this kind of work. But it kind of just, and I think 2020, I don't know. I think I just got lucky. I think I had a couple of people share, like, a couple of reels get really big, and it just kind of happened. So I never planned it. I never wanted to be like I just didn't plan for this at all. So I'm just kind of making the most of it while people still want to listen to me, because they'll get sick of it eventually, I'm sure.
No, I can't see why, because I mean, truthfully, you guys are such a beautiful family.
Yeah.
And I love watching your videos, and getting to talk to you is like, I've literally been fangirling this whole time. I mean, so many of you just, Mike can attest to this, that like, I'm going, oh my God, I get to talk to these people. And they're so, popular, and they're famous to me. And the work that you all do is just amazing to me. And that's partially where Mike and I got this idea to do this show, is to make everybody have everybody have the option of telling their story, and however they want to say it, and in a conversational, comfortable way, without, well, you got to tell me why you're in this situation, and you got to tell me how you did this and that. And I wanted a conversation because it's more comfortable. And I want to make a difference too, because our children are also a part of the LGBTQ and disabled community as such, as I am. And being able to make even the smallest difference for them is what drives me. And I'm sure it drives Mike. And even if it doesn't drive Mike, it does now, because I said so.
It does.
And so
It does.
It does.
I swear it does. Don't hurt me. And so I think it's beautiful having our children being able to, drive us that way, because so many times you have it where it's the opposite, where children kind of aren't taken care of or aren't loved and things like that. And it's just, I think it's a beautiful thing that we can use our love for our children. Because I want to word this right. It's not like we're using our children. We're using our love for them to make a world better. And
it's a motivation, isn't it? They're motivating us to make the world better, which is nice.
It is. And then because of them, it makes me want to make it even better for everyone else too. Because you can't just make it good for one person and leave it at that. Because everybody's a part of it. We all have to, as much as we may not like other people, we have to make it good so that all of us can, survive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Even the people I don't like.
Yes. Well, we can find a way for them, but yeah.
But no, thank you so much it's been such a nice chat. You've created a lovely environment here for people to come and have a little yap.
And thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Oh no, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, truly. You are doing us a huge favor, and this just, I'm doing it again. I'm fangirling.
Your website is ninatame.com, is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay,
I'm generally just Nina Tame across the board. Got an awful digital footprint. Could never get rid of it now if I wanted to be a spy or something.
And you do everything. I mean, I saw on your website you do public speaking and coaching and all sorts of stuff.
Oh yeah,
so check her out.
Anything. Yeah,
it's a great website.
And she is truly like an incredibly wonderful person. So please follow her.
I think we're good.
Yeah, go ahead. Bye. Say bye.
Don't yell at me. All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
If you've made it this far, thank you so much for listening. Please leave a rating for us wherever you listen. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok.
Othering Podcast is brought to you by Loudcore Productions in conjunction with your support. Your host, Mike and Dory Morris, graphics by Joshua Morris, and join us next week on the Othering Podcast.